A shell in the grass in a land full of sparkle leaf trees and soft humming winds, there lived a tiny snail named Nilo. Nilo was not an ordinary snail. His shell had swirls that glowed like the moon, and his eyes sparkled with dreams. He lived under a daffleberry leaf near the Glimmer Creek, where the grass sang soft tunes when the wind passed by. Nilo was smaller than most snails. His friends called him the teacup traveler, because he could fit inside an old teacup left by a giant-footed wanderer named Tomby. Nilo loved the stories he heard from the breeze and the creatures of the forest, but he had never gone far from his leaf. Other creatures told tales of the wide world beyond the Glimmer Creek. There were floating gardens in the east and candy cloud trees in the south. But Nilo had never seen any of them. He wished to explore, but he was afraid of big steps and loud sounds. Every day, Nilo watched butterflies flying high and fireflies dancing at dusk. He dreamed of seeing the fluffy marsh mountains where the sky tickled the earth. But his heart was still shy. He thought, maybe one day, he would be brave. The whistle from the north. One day, while Nilo was sipping morning dew, he heard a whistle from the north wind. It sang through the trees and tickled the blades of grass. Along with the wind came a rolled-up leaf carried by two ants wearing berry caps. The ants were named Ao and Sachi. Ao was from the rain villages and wore red stripes, while Sachi came from the pepperroot hills and had blue cheeks. The ants carried news from the North Whistle Plains. Something was wrong there. The giggle flowers were wilting, and the jellyroot springs had stopped bubbling. The creatures feared that the moon pebble, a magical stone that kept the land glowing, had gone quiet. The ants said only someone very gentle, very patient, and very small could reach the heart of the Whistle Plains. That someone had to pass through tricky tunnels, whispering winds, and sleepy willow vines. Nilo listened. His shell began to tingle. His heart bounced like a pebble in a puddle. He looked around. No one else seemed ready to go. Maybe, just maybe, this was his one-day moment. The moment he would try to be brave. The journey begins. Nilo packed a petal for shade and a droplet bottle for water. He whispered a quiet goodbye to his home under the daffleberry leaf and slid slowly into the grass. The ants clapped their tiny feet as Nilo passed, proud of their new friend. The grass turned into pebble paths, and the pebble paths became long vine bridges. Nilo passed over the Rippleroot River on a leaf raft. A kind moth from the east named May fluttered above, showing him safe ways to travel. May had wings that glowed like golden mangoes. As the sun began to sleep, Nilo found a nest made of moss where he could rest. He looked up at the sky, which was filled with pink clouds and chocolate stars. He had never seen so much wonder in one day. He knew this was just the beginning. The Whispering Wind Caves. The next morning, Nilo came to the entrance of the Whispering Wind Caves. The caves hummed with low sounds like sleepy songs. The walls glowed faintly with twinkle moss. The path was narrow, and the air smelled like peppermint and paper. Inside the cave, the winds told stories from the ancient days. They swirled around Nilo, whispering secrets and riddles. Nilo listened carefully. He could not see far ahead, but he trusted the wind to guide him. He followed the breeze, turning only when it felt right. The floor of the cave was smooth but sometimes slippery. At one point, he slid down a loop-de-loop hill and landed in a pile of giggleberries. The berries laughed when touched, and Nilo couldn't help but smile. After many turns and tunnels, he saw a soft blue light. The cave was ending, and ahead was a field of bubblegrass. The field of bubblegrass was quiet but alive. Each blade of grass grew tiny bubbles that floated away when touched. Some bubbles held songs, some held memories, and others showed pictures from faraway places. Nilo touched one bubble, and it showed a dream of a hummingbird flying above rainbow trees. Another showed a squirrel named Tenzin spinning silk from silver leaves. The grass was gentle, and the wind was calm. But Nilo knew he had to keep going. He met a hedgehog named Luma in the field. Luma had white fur and emerald eyes. She offered Nilo a ride on her back for a while. As they moved through the grass, Nilo told her about the moon pebble and the silent springs. Luma wished him luck and gave him a tiny bell for kindness. When they reached the end of the field, Luma stopped. Ahead were the sleepy willows, the last stop before the Whistle Plains. The sleepy willows were ancient trees with long arms that swayed even without wind. Their branches reached low, brushing the ground like combs of air. The path between them was soft and dreamy. The trees released sleepy dust that made travelers yawn and blink slowly. Nilo wrapped his bell in a petal to block the dust. He moved carefully, one slide at a time. The willows hummed lullabies in a language no creature remembered. Their voices were sweet and heavy. Halfway through, Nilo began to feel sleepy. His eyes drooped. His shell felt warm and cozy. But he remembered the wilting flowers and silent springs. He shook his head gently and took a sip from his droplet bottle. He whispered a wish to the wind and kept moving. At the edge of the willow path stood a golden gate made of woven branches and floating fire beams. It opened as Nilo approached. He had reached the Whistle Plains. The heart of the plain, the Whistle Plains were wide and glowing. But now, the glow was dim. The sky was gray, and the giggle flowers were curled up and silent. The air felt like a forgotten tune. In the middle of the plain stood a small hill made of moonglass stones. At the top sat the moon pebble, dull and quiet. Around it were tiny creatures from all lands, sitting in silence. They had tried to help, but the pebble would not shine. Nilo slid up the hill, step by step. He looked at the moon pebble. It was covered in dust and sadness. He didn't try to fix it with tools or magic. Instead, he sat beside it. He shared a quiet moment. Then, he took out his bell of kindness and placed it beside the stone. The bell made a tiny chime. Then, Nilo gently touched the moon pebble with his tiny feeler. He whispered nothing. He just smiled. And then the moon pebble began to glow. The light returned. At first, the light was small, like a shy blink. Then it grew brighter, glowing like 1,000 stars. The moon pebble shimmered with rainbow warmth. The ground beneath it began to hum. The giggle flowers lifted their heads and laughed once more. The jellyroot springs bubbled up in joy. The creatures of the plains cheered. From the sky, a flock of music birds sang golden notes. The moon pebble had awakened. All because a little snail had dared to be gentle and brave. Nilo stayed on the hill for a while. He watched the land come back to life. The ants, the moth, the hedgehog, and even the whispering winds celebrated his journey. Home under the leaf. When Nilo returned home, the daffleberry leaf had grown 2 new flowers. The air was sweeter. The grass hummed a new tune just for him. He was still small. He still moved slow. But something inside him had changed. He had gone far. He had faced sleepy trees, whispering caves, and silent stones. And he had helped. The creatures of the forest now came to hear his stories. He told them about Luma the hedgehog, the bubblegrass dreams, and the moon pebble. But he never bragged. He simply smiled. He had been brave in his own way. Conclusion: Nilo, the little snail with the moonglow shell, showed that courage doesn't always mean loud steps or sharp words. Sometimes, the bravest hearts are the quietest. Sometimes, the smallest ones bring the biggest light. In a world full of wonders and whispers, the gentle can still shine. And the brave little snail proved that going slow doesn't mean going nowhere. Because even the tiniest journey can change the whole world.